In a quiet corner of Colorado, nestled between towering mountains and thick pine forests, stood a research facility that few people knew about. It wasn't marked on any map, and those who worked there rarely spoke of it to outsiders. The place was called Pine Ridge Labs, and its main purpose was to study the mysteries hidden within human DNA. For years, scientists had been trying to understand why some diseases acted so strangely, or why certain traits seemed to appear out of nowhere in families. But no one expected what Dr. Laura Bennett and her assistant Ethan Cole were about to uncover. Laura was a dedicated scientist with short brown hair and glasses that always slid down her nose when she leaned over her desk. She loved solving puzzles, especially ones that involved biology. Her assistant Ethan was younger, with messy blonde hair and a habit of cracking jokes during long nights in the lab. Together they made a good team. Laura kept things organized and focused while Ethan brought energy and fresh ideas. They had been working together for 2 years, but nothing could have prepared them for what happened on that cold November evening. It started like any other day at Pine Ridge Labs. Laura and Ethan spent their morning reviewing data from recent experiments. They had collected blood samples from volunteers across the country, hoping to find patterns in genetic sequences that might explain rare conditions. Most of the results were predictable. Mutations here, slight variations there. But then something unusual caught Ethan's eye. He squinted at his computer screen, leaning closer as if doing so would make the numbers clearer. "Hey, Laura," he said, tapping his pen against the desk. "Does this look weird to you?" Laura walked over and looked at the screen. At first glance, the sequence appeared normal, a string of letters representing the building blocks of DNA, A, T, C, and G. But as she studied it more closely, she noticed something odd. Certain sections repeated in ways that didn't match anything they'd seen before. It wasn't random noise either, it was too structured, almost like a code. "What sample is this?" Laura asked, pulling up the file details. "It's labeled Subject X," Ethan replied. "No name attached, just a number." Laura frowned. Subject X wasn't part of their official project. Someone must have slipped it into the batch without telling them. She opened another window on her computer and ran a comparison with known genetic databases. The results came back blank. Whatever this was, it didn't match any recorded human genome. "This doesn't make sense," Laura muttered, shaking her head. "It's close enough to be human, but different." Ethan tilted his chair back and crossed his arms. "Different how? Like alien abduction different or lab experiment gone wrong different?" "I don't know yet." Laura sat down at her desk and pulled up more tools to analyze the sequence. As she worked, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were onto something big. Hours passed and the rest of the lab grew quieter as other researchers left for the night. By the time midnight rolled around, only Laura and Ethan remained. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. "Okay, I think I found something," he said, pointing at his screen. "Look at these repeating patterns. They're not biological, or at least not entirely." Laura leaned over his shoulder and stared at the highlighted section. He was right. The pattern resembled binary code, the kind used by computers. Lines of ones and zeros alternated in precise intervals, interspersed with fragments of actual DNA. It was as if someone, or something, had embedded a message inside the genetic material. "That's impossible," Laura whispered. "DNA isn't supposed to do that." "Well, apparently it does," Ethan shot back. "What are we looking at here, some kind of glitch? Or is this proof that humans aren't exactly natural?" The idea was absurd, but the evidence was undeniable. Laura felt a chill run down her spine. If this was real, it meant everything they thought they knew about human biology was wrong. Humans weren't just products of evolution or divine creation. They might have been designed, engineered, built. Neither of them spoke for a moment. The weight of the discovery hung heavy in the air. Finally, Laura stood up and stretched. "We need to tell Dr. Hayes," she said, referring to the head of the facility. "He needs to see this." Ethan nodded, though he looked uneasy. "Do you think he'll believe us?" "He has to," Laura said firmly. "If we're right, this changes everything." They gathered their notes and headed to Dr. Hayes's office. The hallway was dimly lit, and their footsteps echoed softly against the tiled floor. When they reached his door, Laura knocked twice before entering. Dr. Hayes was sitting at his desk reading through a stack of papers. His gray hair was neatly combed and his glasses rested low on his nose, giving him a scholarly appearance. "Dr. Hayes," Laura began, closing the door behind her. "We found something you need to see." Hayes raised an eyebrow but gestured for them to sit. Laura handed him a folder containing the analysis of Subject X's DNA. As he flipped through the pages, his expression shifted from curiosity to concern. "This is highly irregular," he said after a moment. "Where did this sample come from?" "We don't know," Ethan admitted. "It wasn't part of our original data set." Hayes sighed and removed his glasses, rubbing his temples. "I suppose I shouldn't be surprised. This isn't the first time something like this has turned up." "What do you mean?" Laura asked, leaning forward. Hayes hesitated, as if debating whether to share classified information. Finally, he stood up and walked to a locked cabinet in the corner of the room. After unlocking it, he pulled out a thick binder filled with documents. "There have been reports of anomalies like this dating back decades," he explained. "Different labs, different countries, all finding traces of something unnatural in human DNA. No one knows what it means, but governments have kept it under wraps." Laura felt her heart race. Why keep it secret? Shouldn't the public know? "The implications are enormous," Hayes replied. "If humanity learns it may have been engineered, it could destabilize society. People wouldn't know what to believe." Ethan frowned. "But isn't it better to face the truth than live in ignorance?" Hayes gave him a weary smile. "Perhaps, but the truth can be dangerous, especially when we don't fully understand it." As they left Hayes's office, Laura couldn't stop thinking about what he'd said. Dangerous or not, they had uncovered something extraordinary, and deep down she knew they couldn't ignore it. Whatever secrets lay hidden in human DNA, they needed answers, and they were determined to find them. Back in the lab, Laura and Ethan stayed late into the night, running more tests and searching for clues. The mysterious sequence continued to defy explanation, but every new piece of data brought them closer to understanding its purpose. Little did they know, their discovery would set off a chain of events that would challenge everything they believed about themselves and the world around them. Outside, snow began to fall, blanketing the mountain landscape in white. The quiet beauty of the scene contrasted sharply with the turmoil brewing inside the lab. For Laura and Ethan, the journey was just beginning, and the stakes were higher than they could have imagined. The next morning, Laura woke up with a sense of unease. She hadn't slept well, her mind racing with thoughts about the strange DNA sequence they'd found. It felt like she was standing on the edge of something massive, something that could change everything. As she got ready for work, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every sound outside her apartment seemed louder than usual. The rustling of leaves, the distant hum of cars, even the footsteps of neighbors passing by. She told herself it was just nerves, but deep down, she wasn't so sure. When she arrived, at Pine Ridge Labs, Ethan was already there, hunched over his computer. His face lit up when he saw her, though there was a hint of worry in his eyes. "Morning," he said, pushing his chair back. "I've been digging deeper into Subject X's data. You're not going to believe this." Laura set her bag down and walked over to his desk. On the screen was a graph showing patterns within the DNA sequence. The more they analyzed it, the clearer it became that these weren't random anomalies. They formed a deliberate structure, almost like a language. "It's like instructions," Ethan said, pointing to one section. "But who writes instructions in DNA?" Laura pulled up a chair and studied the graph. Her stomach churned as she realized how big this discovery truly was. If someone, or something, had encoded information into human DNA, it meant humanity might not be entirely natural. They could have been engineered, designed by an intelligence far beyond anything humans had ever encountered. Before they could discuss it further, Dr. Hayes appeared in the doorway. He looked tired, his usually sharp suit slightly rumpled as if he hadn't slept either. "Dr. Bennett, Mr. Cole," he said, stepping inside. "We need to talk." They followed him to a secure conference room where he closed the door behind them. The walls were lined with monitors displaying encrypted files, and the air smelled faintly of coffee and stress. Hayes gestured for them to sit before pulling up a presentation on one of the screens. "I've spent the night reviewing classified documents related to your findings," he began. "What you've uncovered isn't isolated. Similar anomalies have been detected worldwide, often in individuals exhibiting unusual traits or abilities." Ethan leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. "What kind of abilities?" Hayes hesitated, then clicked to the next slide. It showed photos of people, ordinary-looking men and women, but each had notes attached describing extraordinary feats. One man claimed he could feel earthquakes hours before they happened. A woman reported hearing voices no one else could hear. Another individual demonstrated rapid healing after severe injuries. "These cases were dismissed as hoaxes or medical oddities," Hayes explained. "But now we know better. Their DNA matches the same patterns you've identified in Subject X." Laura felt a chill run down her spine. "Are you saying these people are different? Like, not fully human?" "It's possible," Hayes admitted. "Or perhaps they represent the next stage of human evolution. Either way, their existence suggests humanity may have been created, or altered, for a specific purpose." The room fell silent as the weight of his words sank in. Laura glanced at Ethan, who looked equally stunned. Neither of them had expected the conversation to take such a turn. Before they could respond, Hayes continued, "There's more. Some researchers believe the anomalies point to an external influence, an advanced intelligence responsible for designing humans. Whether it's alien, artificial, or something else entirely remains unknown." Ethan raised his hand, as if still in school. "So, what you're saying is, we're not alone?" "Not necessarily," Hayes replied, "but we're definitely not what we think we are." As they left the conference room, Laura's mind raced with questions. Who or what had tampered with human biology? And why? The answers seemed just out of reach, hidden somewhere in the tangled web of genetic code. Back in the lab, she and Ethan resumed their work, determined to uncover more clues. They ran simulations, cross-referenced data, and even reached out to experts in other fields for help. One of those experts was Rachel Monroe, a linguist specializing in ancient languages. Laura had met her at a conference years ago and remembered her sharp mind and relentless curiosity. When Laura called to explain the situation, Rachel didn't hesitate to join them. By the time she arrived at Pine Ridge Labs, Laura and Ethan had compiled a list of sequences they believed contained meaningful information. Rachel took one look at the data and whistled softly. "This is unlike anything I've ever seen," she said, scrolling through the lines of code. "It's structured, repetitive, and incredibly complex. Whoever, or whatever, wrote this knew exactly what they were doing." Over the next few days, the three of them worked tirelessly to decode the sequences. Rachel suggested treating them like an ancient script, breaking them down into smaller units and looking for recurring symbols. Slowly but surely, patterns began to emerge. Some sections resembled mathematical formulas, while others seemed to describe biological processes. But the most intriguing part was a series of symbols that repeated throughout the entire sequence, almost like a signature. "I think this might be the key," Rachel said one evening, pointing to the recurring symbols. "If we can figure out what they mean, we might unlock the rest of the message." As they focused on deciphering the symbols, strange things started happening around them. Equipment malfunctioned without explanation, lights flickered, and computers displayed error messages despite functioning perfectly moments earlier. At first, they chalked it up to technical issues, but the incidents grew more frequent and more bizarre. One night while working late, Laura noticed something odd on her computer screen. She had been typing notes when the cursor suddenly moved, on its own, deleting her text and replacing it with a single line. "You're close, but you're not ready." Her breath caught in her throat. She stared at the screen, frozen, unsure if she should call for Ethan or try to shut the computer down. Before she could decide, the message disappeared, leaving her document blank. Heart pounding, she grabbed her phone and dialed Ethan's number. "Hey, Laura," he answered groggily. "What's up?" "I think someone, or something, is trying to communicate with us," she whispered, glancing nervously at the empty lab. "My computer just wrote me a message." There was a pause on the other end. What did it say? She hesitated, replaying the words in her mind. It said, "You're close, but you're not ready." Ethan didn't laugh it off or dismiss her concerns. Instead, he promised to come back to the lab immediately. When he arrived, they told Rachel about the incident, expecting her to be skeptical. To their surprise, she nodded thoughtfully. "It makes sense," she said. "If this sequence contains some kind of intelligence, it might be aware of our progress. Maybe it's testing us." "Testing us for what?" Laura asked, her voice trembling. Rachel shrugged. "That's the million-dollar question." Despite the unsettling events, they pressed on, driven by a mix of fear and determination. Each new discovery brought them closer to understanding the truth, but also closer to forces they couldn't fully comprehend. Late one night, as they pored over decoded fragments, Rachel let out a gasp. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a translation she'd pieced together. "It says, 'The vessel awaits activation, seek the core.'" "The vessel?" Ethan echoed. "What does that mean?" Laura frowned, her mind racing. "Could it refer to humans? Are we the vessels?" "If we are," Rachel said quietly, "then whoever wrote this code must have a plan for us, and we might not like it." The realization sent a shiver down Laura's spine. They had uncovered evidence that humanity might not be entirely natural, that they could have been designed for a purpose far beyond their understanding. But the closer they came to unraveling the mystery, the more dangerous it became. Someone, or something, was watching them, guiding their steps, and warning them to proceed with caution. As dawn broke over the mountains, casting golden light across the lab, Laura felt a mixture of excitement and dread. They were on the brink of discovering something monumental. But the cost of that knowledge remained unclear. Whatever awaited them next, one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The message from the decoded sequence, "The vessel awaits activation, seek the core," stuck in Laura's mind like a splinter she couldn't remove. It was cryptic, unsettling, and yet somehow impossible to ignore. She spent hours staring at the words, trying to make sense of them. If humans were the vessels, what did it mean to be activated? And where was this core they were supposed to seek? Ethan broke the silence first. "Okay," he said, leaning back in his chair and stretching his arms. "Let's think about this logically. If we're looking for a core, it has to be something central, something tied to whatever created these sequences in the first place." Rachel nodded, her brow furrowed in concentration. "It could refer to a physical location," she suggested. "Maybe a place where the original blueprint for humanity is stored." Laura frowned. "But how do we even start looking? We don't have any leads, no map, nothing." As if on cue, Ethan's computer beeped softly. He turned to check the screen and froze. A new file had appeared on his desktop, one that hadn't been there before. The file name read, coordinates.txt. "What the heck?" Ethan muttered, opening the file. Inside was a set of numbers written in plain text, latitude and longitude. Laura leaned over his shoulder, her pulse quickening. "Where does that lead?" Ethan typed the coordinates into a mapping program. The screen zoomed in on a remote area in New Mexico, a desert landscape dotted with mesas and canyons. "It's in the middle of nowhere," he said, scratching his head. "No towns, no landmarks, just rocks." Rachel crossed her arms. "That doesn't seem random. Someone or something wants us to go there." The three of them exchanged uneasy glances. The idea of traveling to an unknown location based on a mysterious message was risky, but they couldn't deny the possibility that answers awaited them. After some discussion, they decided to investigate further. They would need help, though, someone who could navigate dangerous terrain and keep them safe. That's when Marcus Drake entered the picture. Marcus was a former military pilot who had left the service after uncovering corruption within his unit. He now worked as a freelance consultant, helping people with sensitive missions that required discretion. Laura had met him briefly at a science conference and remembered his sharp instincts and steady demeanor. When she called him, explaining the situation, he listened carefully before agreeing to join them. "I'm not saying I believe all this alien-engineered human stuff," Marcus said over the phone. "But if you've got evidence worth investigating, count me in." 2 days later, they were packed and ready to leave. The drive to New Mexico took nearly 10 hours, during which none of them spoke much. The closer they got to the coordinates, the heavier the air seemed to grow, as if the weight of their mission was pressing down on them. When they finally arrived, the landscape was eerily quiet. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the cracked earth. "This is it," Ethan said, checking the GPS on his phone. "We're here." They climbed out of the van and surveyed the area. At first glance, there was nothing remarkable, just sand, rocks, and scrubby bushes. But then Rachel spotted something unusual. A faint outline etched into the ground, forming a perfect circle about 50 feet wide. It looked man-made, though weathered by time. "There," she said, pointing. "What is that?" Marcus walked over and knelt beside the edge of the circle. "Looks like some kind of entrance," he said, brushing away dirt to reveal a metal hatch embedded in the ground. Whoever built this didn't want it to be found easily. With Marcus's help, they managed to pry the hatch open, revealing a dark stairway leading underground. The air smelled musty, and the walls were lined with smooth stone, glowing faintly as if lit from within. As they descended, Laura felt her heart pounding in her chest. Every step brought them deeper into the unknown. At the bottom of the stairs, they entered a massive chamber unlike anything they'd ever seen. In the center of the room floated a pulsating sphere, suspended in mid-air without any visible support. Its surface shimmered with colors that shifted and danced, emitting a soft hum that resonated through the space. "Is that the core?" Ethan whispered, his voice trembling. Laura nodded slowly, unable to tear her eyes away. The sphere seemed alive, radiating energy that made her skin tingle. She stepped closer, drawn to it almost against her will. As she approached, the sphere began to glow brighter, responding to her presence. Suddenly, images flooded her mind. Visions of towering figures standing in a vast laboratory, manipulating strands of glowing DNA. These beings were humanoid but far larger, their features obscured by flowing robes. They moved with purpose, shaping life itself as if sculpting clay. Laura saw flashes of early Earth, barren and lifeless, until the figures introduced the first spark of creation. Humans weren't just products of evolution. They were designed, crafted with precision and care. The visions ended abruptly, leaving Laura gasping for breath. She stumbled backward, clutching her head. "Did anyone else see that?" she asked, her voice shaky. "No," Rachel replied, her eyes wide. "What did you see?" Before Laura could answer, alarms blared throughout the chamber. Red lights flashed, and a robotic voice echoed around them. "Unauthorized access detected. Security protocols initiated." "Uh-oh," Marcus said, grabbing his flashlight. "I think we've overstayed our welcome." Heavy footsteps echoed from the stairway as armed guards stormed into the chamber. They wore black uniforms with no insignia, their faces masked and expressionless. One of them shouted, "Step away from the artifact!" Laura hesitated, torn between fear and curiosity. The sphere pulsed again, as if urging her to act. Without thinking, she reached out and touched its surface. A surge of energy coursed through her body, filling her with warmth and clarity. The guards froze, their weapons lowering as if controlled by an invisible force. "What's happening?" Ethan asked, his voice barely audible over the hum of the sphere. "I don't know," Laura admitted, staring at her hands. "But I think it wants me to understand." The sphere projected another wave of images, this time showing a timeline of human history. Wars, discoveries, triumphs, and tragedies unfolded before their eyes. Then came scenes of the future, cities floating among the stars, humans coexisting with advanced machines, and glimpses of a galactic civilization. It was beautiful, awe-inspiring, and terrifying all at once. One of the guards recovered enough to shout, "Shut it down, now!" Marcus grabbed Laura's arm. "We need to go, like right now." Reluctantly, Laura backed away from the sphere, which dimmed slightly, but continued to hum. The group retreated up the stairs, pursued by the guards. By the time they reached the surface, night had fallen and the desert was pitch black. Marcus led them to the van, starting the engine just as the guards emerged from the hatch. "Hold on tight," he said, slamming the accelerator. The van sped off, kicking up clouds of dust as bullets whizzed past them. For several tense minutes, they raced across the desert, the guards' vehicles hot on their tail. Finally, Marcus took a sharp turn onto a narrow dirt road, losing their pursuers in the maze-like terrain. When they were sure they weren't being followed, they pulled over to catch their breath. "That was insane," Ethan said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "What the heck was that thing?" Laura stared out the window, her mind still reeling from the visions. "I think it was a message," she said softly. "A message from whoever created us. They want us to evolve, to become something greater. But they also gave us a choice, to grow naturally or to force the process." Rachel sighed. "And someone out there really doesn't want us to make that choice ourselves." As they drove back toward civilization, the weight of their discovery settled over them. They had uncovered proof that humanity wasn't entirely natural, that they carried the remnants of an ancient design within their DNA. But more importantly, they had learned that the path forward was theirs to decide. Whatever lay ahead, one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The ride back from New Mexico was tense and silent. Laura sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window at the endless stretch of desert. Her mind replayed the events in the underground chamber over and over again. The glowing sphere, the visions, the guards chasing them. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched even now, as if invisible eyes were tracking their every move. Ethan sat in the back seat, clutching his laptop like it was a lifeline. He kept glancing at Laura, wanting to ask her about the visions but unsure how to start. Rachel, squeezed into the middle seat, stared at her hands, lost in thought. Marcus drove with both hands firmly on the wheel, his jaw tight. None of them spoke for hours, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. "So, what do we do now?" Laura turned to look at him, her expression unreadable. "We figure out who those guards were and why they don't want us near that thing." Rachel nodded. "And we need to understand what the sphere meant when it showed you those visions, Laura. If humanity was designed by someone, or something, we have to know why." Marcus glanced at them through the rearview mirror. "First things first," he said. "We need to lay low. Those guys weren't messing around. Whoever they work for has resources, and they'll come after us again." They decided to stop at a small motel off the highway, far enough from the desert to feel safe but close enough to regroup. The rooms were basic, with faded wallpaper and creaky floors, but they didn't care. All they wanted was a place to think and plan. That night, Laura sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the floor. Her head was spinning with questions. Why had the sphere responded to her? What did it mean to be chosen as its messenger, or whatever she was? And most importantly, what choice was humanity supposed to make? Ethan knocked softly on her door. "Can I come in?" he asked. Laura nodded, and he stepped inside, closing the door behind him. He looked nervous, which wasn't like him. "Are you okay?" he asked, sitting down across from her. "I don't know," she admitted. "I keep thinking about what I saw. Those beings, they created us. They gave us life, but not just randomly. They had a purpose, and now they're waiting for us to decide what comes next." Ethan frowned. "What kind of decision are we talking about here, like evolve or stay the same?" Something like that, Laura replied. But it's bigger than evolution. It's about what it means to be human. Do we embrace what we are or try to become something else entirely? Before Ethan could respond, there was a knock at the door. It was Rachel. Guys, you need to see this, she said urgently. They followed her to Marcus's room, where he was hunched over his laptop. On the screen was a video file that had been sent anonymously to Ethan's email account. The subject line read, "You've seen too much." "What is this?" Laura asked, leaning closer. Marcus clicked play. The video showed grainy footage of the underground chamber they'd visited earlier. In the clip, several people in lab coats examined the glowing sphere, taking measurements and recording data. One of them stood out, a tall man with sharp features and cold eyes. He addressed the camera directly, his voice calm, but menacing. "You've stumbled upon something beyond your comprehension," he said. "Humanity is not ready for the truth. Leave this matter alone or face the consequences." The video ended abruptly, leaving the screen black. No one spoke for a moment. Then Marcus leaned back in his chair, exhaling sharply. "Well, that answers one question. Someone doesn't want us poking around." "But who are they working for?" Rachel asked. "And why are they so desperate to keep this secret?" Ethan rubbed his temples. "It's like Dr. Hayes said. This knowledge could destabilize society. People wouldn't know what to believe." Laura shook her head. "No, there's more to it than that. This isn't just about keeping the public in the dark. It's about control. Whoever these people are, they want to decide humanity's future for themselves." The group fell silent, each considering the implications. Finally, Marcus spoke up. "We can't fight them head-on. They're too powerful. But maybe we can find allies, people who've encountered the same anomalies and are willing to help." Rachel nodded. "There must be others out there. Scientists, researchers, even ordinary people who've experienced strange things. If we can connect with them, we might stand a chance." Over the next few days, they worked tirelessly to gather information. Using encrypted channels, they reached out to contacts in the scientific community, sharing fragments of their findings without revealing too much. Slowly, responses trickled in. Some were skeptical, dismissing their claims as conspiracy theories. Others were intrigued, offering theories of their own. One response stood out. A woman named Dr. Emily Carter, a geneticist based in Chicago, claimed to have studied similar DNA patterns in her own research. She agreed to meet with them, provided they came alone and kept their visit discreet. When they arrived at her lab, Emily greeted them warmly but with a hint of caution. She led them to a private office where she pulled up data on her computer. "I've been tracking these anomalies for years," she explained. "At first I thought they were errors in my equipment. But the more I looked, the clearer it became. They're deliberate." Emily showed them graphs and charts detailing patterns identical to the ones they'd found in Subject X. "Here's the kicker," she said, pointing to a specific section. "These sequences aren't static. They change over time, as if responding to external stimuli." Laura's eyes widened. "Like the sphere in the chamber. It pulsed when I touched it." Emily nodded. "Exactly. Whatever created these sequences left behind a mechanism, a way to communicate with us, or maybe to guide us. The pieces started coming together. Humanity wasn't just engineered. It was designed to evolve under certain conditions. The sphere wasn't merely an artifact. It was a key, a tool meant to unlock humanity's potential. But the process required a choice, one that only humans could make. As they left Emily's lab, Laura felt a renewed sense of purpose. They weren't alone in this. Others had glimpsed fragments of the truth, and together they could uncover the rest. But time was running out. The organization that had chased them in the desert was still out there, watching, waiting. Back at the motel, they gathered in Marcus's room to discuss their next move. "We need to go back to the chamber," Laura said firmly. "The sphere holds the answers. If we can decode its message completely, we might finally understand what's expected of us." Marcus raised an eyebrow. You realize they'll be expecting that, right? Going back there is suicide. We don't have a choice, Laura insisted. If we don't act, someone else will. And they won't have humanity's best interests at heart. After some debate, they agreed to return, but this time they would prepare. Marcus used his connections to gather supplies, non-lethal weapons, surveillance gear, and disguises. Rachel and Ethan worked on decoding more of the sphere's language, hoping to anticipate its behavior. Laura spent hours meditating, trying to strengthen the connection she'd felt during her first encounter. A week later, they set out for New Mexico once again. The journey was tense, every shadow and sound making them jump. When they reached the coordinates, they approached cautiously, scanning the area for signs of danger. To their surprise, the entrance to the chamber appeared undisturbed. Inside, the sphere hung silently, its glow dimmer than before. Laura stepped forward, her heart pounding. As she reached out to touch it, the room lit up, bathing them in radiant light. Images flooded her mind again, clearer this time. She saw humanity's past, present, and future, all interconnected, all part of a grand design. Then came the voice, not audible but resonating deep within her consciousness. You are the vessel. The choice is yours. Awaken or remain dormant. Laura gasped, pulling her hand away. The others stared at her, waiting for an explanation. It's asking us to choose, she said, her voice trembling. To awaken humanity's full potential, or leave things as they are. Ethan frowned. What happens if we choose wrong? I don't know, Laura admitted, but I think the consequences will affect everyone, not just us. They debated the options, long into the night, weighing the risks and rewards. Finally, Laura made a decision. We let humanity grow naturally, she said. Forcing evolution could destroy what makes us human. We stick with the safeguards the creators left behind. The others nodded in agreement. Together, they interfaced with the sphere, inputting their choice. The light dimmed and the hum faded, leaving the chamber eerily quiet. As they climbed back to the surface, Laura felt a mix of relief and uncertainty. They had made their decision, but the path ahead remained unclear. Outside, the desert stretched endlessly, bathed in the pale light of dawn. For better or worse, humanity's fate was in its own hands now. And though the journey was far from over, Laura knew they had taken the first step toward understanding what it truly meant to be human. The decision to preserve humanity's natural evolution felt like a weight lifted off Laura's shoulders, but it also brought new questions. What exactly had they chosen? And what would happen next? The sphere had accepted their input, its glow, fading as if satisfied, but none of them could shake the feeling that they were part of something much larger, something still unfolding. As they drove away from the desert, Marcus glanced at Laura in the rearview mirror. You think we did the right thing? He asked, his voice low. Laura hesitated before answering. I don't know if it was the right thing, she admitted, but it felt like the safer choice. Forcing humanity to evolve could have been disastrous. We're not ready for that. Ethan leaned forward from the back seat. But what if ready isn't the point? What if this whole setup was designed to push us into becoming something greater? Rachel turned to look at him. And what if it wasn't? What if forcing the process destroys the very things that make us human? Our curiosity, our creativity, our flaws? The conversation trailed off, each of them lost in their own thoughts. They had made a choice, but the implications were vast and uncertain. The sphere's creators, or whoever they were, had left humanity with a responsibility, one that came without instructions or guarantees. When they reached the outskirts of the nearest town, Marcus pulled over. We need to split up for now, he said. If those guards are still tracking us, staying together makes us an easier target. No one argued. It made sense to scatter, at least temporarily, until they could figure out their next move. They exchanged phone numbers and agreed to check in regularly. Before parting ways, Laura looked at each of them, her expression serious. Whatever happens, we stick to the plan. No rushing into anything reckless. Got it? They nodded, and then they went their separate ways. Laura and Ethan headed north, while Rachel and Marcus took different routes. For the first time since the discovery of Subject X, Laura felt truly alone. Even with Ethan by her side, the enormity of what they'd uncovered loomed over her like a storm cloud. A few days later, Laura received an unexpected call. It was Dr. Hayes, the head of Pine Ridge Labs. His tone was urgent. "Dr. Bennett, I need to see you immediately," he said. "There's been a development." Laura hesitated. Part of her wanted to ignore him. After everything that had happened, she didn't trust anyone connected to the lab, but curiosity got the better of her. "Where are you?" she asked. "I'm in Denver," Hayes replied. "Please come quickly. This can't wait." Against her better judgment, Laura agreed to meet him. She convinced Ethan to stay behind, just in case. When she arrived at the small cafe where Hayes had suggested they meet, she found him sitting at a corner table, looking more disheveled than usual. His tie was loose, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. "Thank you for coming," he said as she sat down. "I owe you an explanation." Laura crossed her arms. "Start talking." Hayes sighed, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "The organization you encountered in the desert, they're called Nexus. They've been monitoring anomalies in human biology for decades. At first, their goal was to protect humanity from itself, but over time, their priorities shifted." "What do you mean shifted?" Laura asked. "They believe humanity needs guidance," Hayes explained. "Not just protection, but control. They think we're too flawed, too chaotic to handle the knowledge of our origins. So they've been trying to suppress it, destroy evidence, silence researchers, manipulate public perception." Laura's stomach churned. "And you? Are you part of this Nexus group?" Hayes shook his head. "Not anymore. I used to work with them back when I thought their intentions were noble. But I've seen what they're capable of. They'll stop at nothing to maintain their grip on the truth." Laura leaned back in her chair, processing his words. "Why tell me all this now?" "Because they know about you," Hayes said grimly. "They know you interacted with the sphere, and they won't let you walk away unscathed." Laura felt a chill run down her spine. "What do they want from me?" "They want to use you," Hayes replied. "Your connection to the sphere makes you valuable, to them and to others who oppose them. You're caught in the middle of a war you didn't ask for." Before Laura could respond, a loud crash echoed through the cafe. She turned to see shattered glass raining onto the floor. Two men in black tactical gear burst inside, their weapons trained on Hayes. One of them shouted, "Don't move!" Laura froze, her heart pounding. Hayes stood up slowly, raising his hands. "It's me they want," he said calmly. "Let her go." The men ignored him, grabbing Hayes roughly and dragging him toward the door. Laura instinctively reached for her phone, but one of the men barked, "Drop it!" She complied, watching helplessly as they shoved Hayes into a waiting van and sped off. For a moment, she sat there, stunned. Then adrenaline kicked in, and she bolted out of the cafe, dialing Ethan's number as she ran. "They took Hayes," she gasped when he answered. "We need to find out where they're taking him." Back at a safe house they'd rented under fake names, Laura and Ethan worked frantically to piece together clues. Using Hayes's contacts and information he'd shared during their meeting, they identified a possible location, an abandoned military base on the outskirts of Colorado Springs. Nexus often used such places for covert operations. "We can't storm the place," Ethan said, pacing the room. "There's no way we're equipped for that." "We don't have to," Laura replied. "We just need to get close enough to gather intel. If we can confirm Hayes is there, we can alert someone who can help, law enforcement, maybe even the media." Marcus and Rachel joined them shortly after, having received updates via encrypted messages. Together, they devised a plan. Under cover of darkness, they approached the base using night vision goggles and thermal scanners to avoid detection. The facility was heavily guarded, but they managed to slip past the perimeter undetected. Inside, they found evidence of Nexus's activities, files detailing experiments on individuals with anomalous DNA, blueprints for advanced technology derived from the sphere, and recordings of intercepted communications. Most chilling of all was a video log featuring Hayes, visibly shaken, confessing his role in Nexus's operations and warning viewers about their true intentions. "This is bad," Rachel whispered, shaking her head. "If this gets out, people will panic." "But if it doesn't," Laura countered, "Nexus wins. We have to expose them." As they prepared to leave, alarms blared throughout the facility. Guards swarmed the area, searching for intruders. The team split up, creating distractions to buy time. Laura and Ethan doubled back to retrieve a flash drive containing critical data, narrowly avoiding capture. By the time they regrouped outside, dawn was breaking. Exhausted but determined, they uploaded the stolen files to secure servers accessible only by trusted allies within the scientific community and independent journalists. Within hours, the story broke worldwide. Humanity's engineered origins, Nexus's manipulations, and the existence of the sphere all laid bare for the world to see. The fallout was immediate and overwhelming. Governments scrambled to address the revelations, while conspiracy theorists celebrated vindication. Ordinary people grappled with existential questions, unsure how to reconcile their newfound understanding of themselves with their daily lives. Laura and her team became reluctant celebrities, hailed as whistleblowers by some and vilified as troublemakers by others. But amid the chaos, Laura found solace in one fact: humanity now knew the truth. Whether they chose to embrace it or reject it was up to them. As she watched news coverage of protests, debates, and scientific conferences sparked by their actions, she realized the journey was far from over. Humanity had been given a choice, and it was finally theirs to make. Whatever the future held, Laura knew they had planted the seeds of change, and that, she decided, was enough. The world was in chaos. News outlets couldn't stop talking about the revelations Laura and her team had uncovered. Overnight, humanity had learned it wasn't entirely natural. It had been engineered by an unknown intelligence. The sphere, the DNA anomalies, Nexus's manipulations, all of it was out in the open now. People were divided. Some embraced the idea, seeing it as proof of humanity's potential. Others rejected it, clinging to beliefs that felt safer, more familiar. Laura sat on a park bench in Denver watching people pass by. She hadn't slept much since the story broke. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw flashes of the sphere, heard the voice that had echoed in her mind. It wasn't just her decision anymore. Billions of people were grappling with the same questions. What did it mean to be human? And what should they do next? Ethan joined her, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Here," he said, handing one to her. "You look like you need this." She smiled faintly, taking the cup. "Thanks. I don't know how much longer I can keep going like this." "You've done more than anyone could ask," Ethan replied. "But we're not done yet. Not really." They sat in silence for a moment, sipping their coffee. Around them, life went on. People walking dogs, kids playing, couples chatting. To them, it must have seemed like any other day. But Laura knew better. Beneath the surface, the world was shifting. Later that afternoon, Rachel called an emergency meeting at a rented apartment they'd been using as a base. Marcus was already there when Laura and Ethan arrived. He looked tired but alert, his laptop open on the table. "We've got a problem," he said without preamble. "What kind of problem?" Laura asked, sitting down. "Nexus isn't giving up," Marcus replied. "They're regrouping, trying to discredit us. They're spinning the story, saying we fabricated everything to gain fame or money." Rachel nodded grimly. "And they're targeting us personally. Someone hacked into my emails and leaked private messages. They're trying to make us look untrustworthy." Ethan groaned. "This is exactly what we were afraid of. They'll do anything to take control of the narrative." Laura leaned forward, her expression hardening. "Then we fight back. We've got evidence they don't. If we stay quiet, they win. If we keep pushing, people will see the truth. But how? Rachel asked. Every move we make seems to get twisted. We go public, Laura said firmly. Not through reporters or politicians, directly to the people, social media, live streams, podcasts, whatever gets our message out. We tell them everything, no filters, no spin, just the facts. Marcus raised an eyebrow. That's risky. Once we put ourselves out there, there's no turning back. I know, Laura admitted. But if we don't, Nexus will bury us, and the truth along with us. After some debate, they agreed to proceed. Over the next few days, they worked tirelessly to prepare. Rachel wrote scripts and gathered visuals to explain the science behind their discoveries. Ethan set up secure servers to host live broadcasts, ensuring they couldn't be shut down easily. Marcus coordinated logistics, making sure they stayed one step ahead of anyone trying to track them. Laura focused on the message itself, crafting a speech that would resonate with people around the globe. Finally, the day came. Late at night, when most of the world was asleep, they went live. Laura stood in front of a simple backdrop, her face illuminated by soft lighting. Behind her, a holographic image of the sphere rotated slowly, its glow casting subtle shadows. On the walls, hello? She began, her voice steady despite the nerves churning inside her. My name is Dr. Laura Bennett. What I'm about to share with you may sound unbelievable, but I promise you it's real. For nearly an hour, she spoke. She explained the DNA anomalies, the underground chamber, the sphere, and the visions it had shown her. She described Nexus's attempts to suppress the truth and shared evidence proving their existence. She didn't sugarcoat anything. She laid it all out, letting viewers decide for themselves what to believe. By the time she finished, millions of people were watching. Comments flooded in, ranging from disbelief to gratitude. Some accused her of lying, while others praised her bravery. But one thing was clear: the conversation had begun. In the days that followed, the impact of Laura's broadcast rippled across the globe. Scientists who had previously been silent came forward, sharing their own findings about human biology. Activists demanded investigations into Nexus and similar organizations. Governments issued statements promising transparency, but few people trusted them anymore. Nexus fought back fiercely. They released fake reports, planted false stories, and even attempted to hack into the team's systems. But every attack only strengthened the resolve of those fighting for the truth. Ordinary citizens rallied around Laura and her team, organizing protests and spreading awareness online. One evening, as Laura scrolled through social media updates, she noticed something unusual. A hashtag had started trending. Humanity chooses. It was accompanied by images of people holding signs, writing messages, and sharing personal stories about what it meant to be human. Some talked about overcoming challenges, others about love, creativity, and resilience. The movement was growing organically, driven by individuals rather than institutions. Ethan walked in, carrying a stack of papers. "Have you seen this?" he asked, pointing to his phone. "I have," Laura replied, smiling. "It's amazing. People are taking ownership of the truth, not just accepting it, but shaping it." "It's like the sphere knew this would happen," Ethan said thoughtfully. "That humanity would rise to the occasion." Laura nodded. "Maybe that's why it gave us the choice. Not because it doubted us, but because it believed in us." Weeks turned into months. The initial frenzy died down, replaced by quieter, more meaningful discussions. Schools began teaching about humanity's engineered origins alongside traditional theories of evolution. Artists created works inspired by the revelations, exploring themes of identity, purpose, and connection. Philosophers debated whether being engineered diminished or enhanced humanity's value. Laura and her team continued their work, traveling the world to speak at conferences, universities, and community events. They weren't heroes, they insisted. They were simply messengers. Their goal was to help humanity navigate the changes ahead, not dictate them. One night, as Laura stood on a stage addressing a packed auditorium, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had started this journey searching for answers, but she had found something far greater: hope. Hope that humanity could face the unknown together, embracing both its flaws and its potential. After the talk, a young girl approached her, clutching a notebook. "Dr. Bennett?" she asked shyly. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," Laura said, kneeling to meet her eye level. The girl hesitated before speaking. "If humans were made by someone else, does that mean we're still special?" Laura smiled warmly. "Absolutely. Being special isn't about where we came from. It's about what we choose to do with the time we have. And right now, we have the chance to create something truly extraordinary." The girl beamed, scribbling notes in her book before running, off to join her parents. Laura watched her go, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but humanity had always thrived in the face of challenges. Whatever lay beyond the horizon, they would face it, together. As she left the auditorium, the cool night air greeted her, carrying whispers of possibility. The sphere's creators had given humanity a gift, not answers, but questions. Questions that would shape the future for generations to come. And as Laura looked up at the stars, she whispered softly to herself, "What the heck is wrong with human biology? Maybe nothing. Yet."